outside the U.S. Supreme Court in Washington as justices hear arguments over whether district court judges have the power to issue nationwide temporary injunctions. In this case, over the president's executive action to end birthright citizenship. President Trump signed an executive order on his first day in office, ordering the end of the long-standing policy that gives children whose parents who entered the country illegally U.S. citizenship upon birth if born on U.S. soil. 3 federal judges in Maryland, Massachusetts, and Washington signed an injunction to block the president's order, calling it unconstitutional and sending the case to the Supreme Court. At the heart of the case before the justices today, can a judge make a decision that applies to the entire country? A newly released poll from NPR and Ipsos shows that 53% of Americans oppose the idea of ending birthright citizenship. 28% of those polled support the administration's efforts. 17% say they don't know. Under the 14th Amendment, quote, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. Joining us now is CBS News chief legal correspondent Jan Crawford. Jan, thanks for being here. What are both sides arguing, and why could this have broader implications beyond this executive order?
Well, those 3 judges that you mentioned who blocked this executive order that would basically limit automatic birthright citizenship, as you described, they entered their rulings nationwide. Now, usually when you file a lawsuit challenging something, the lawsuit just applies to you or the parties in the case. But here, those 3 judges said, nope, we're going to go well beyond our courtrooms, and they're going to apply across the country to every person. And so that's really the issue in this case today, whether those judges can enter those sweeping injunctions, as you described, or whether, that is not allowed under the federal law that gives the courts jurisdiction. Now, on the other side, people who obviously oppose these efforts to change birthright citizenship, who filed these lawsuits, say this kind of nationwide order is appropriate in a case like this, because, you can't have a situation where you have citizens of different states. One state you're a citizen, and another state, if the rule is different, then you're not. So they're saying birthright citizenship is a perfect case to have a nationwide injunction. And that's really what the argument focused on today. It's not about the underlying merits of birthright citizenship, although, of course, that really overshadows everything in this case, Lindsay.
So the High Court not examining the legality of the birthright citizenship executive order, could that come at some point?
Absolutely. I think that they are going to take that up, and they suggested several different ways that they could go about doing that, potentially, within the next month or so. So I think they know that is coming, that eventually that may be an issue for the court to decide. But so far, Trump has lost at every turn. I mean, every judge in these lower courts that has considered this issue has ruled against him, not just these 3 judges that we're talking about, but there have been other lawsuits filed where the rulings just applied to the people in the case or in the states. And so he's lost at every turn on this. It's not a great issue for him. But the question is whether or not the Supreme Court is going to do something to rein in these injunctions. And they have been kind of across the board to a number of President Trump's executive orders. There have been 40 of them entered so far in other kind of cases where Trump is trying to, change policies and do things with an executive order. And that's not unique to President Trump. This is not a partisan issue. President Biden opposed these nationwide injunctions because he was having to deal with them with conservative judges. President Obama also did not like these nationwide injunctions. Presidents want to get things done. They want to be able to sign their orders and make things happen. And when a judge comes in and says, one judge says, no, I'm going to block your policy nationwide, the presidents here, Biden, Obama, Trump, now Trump would say they can't do that. They don't have the authority to do that. And that's what the justices focused on today, that kind of authority a judge would have.
Jan Crawford, thanks so much.